The city slept quietly, the streets empty under the pale glow of streetlights. Only the occasional car passed, its headlights cutting across the darkness. In one small apartment on the edge of town, a man sat alone, reading a book. He didn't hear the distant sound of sirens growing louder, nor did he notice the dark shapes moving toward his door. A sudden, sharp knock broke the silence. 3 heavy bangs, one after another. The man looked up, frowning. At first, he thought it was a neighbor or a delivery, but the sound was too forceful. Then a deep voice called through the door. "Police! Open up!" The man's heart skipped a beat, though he tried to stay calm. He walked slowly to the door, hesitated for a moment, and then unlocked it. As soon as the door swung open, 3 officers in full gear pushed their way inside. "You are under arrest," one of them said, his tone flat and official. "You have the right to remain silent." The man blinked in shock. "Wait, what? Arrest? For what?" The officers ignored his question. They moved quickly, restraining him with handcuffs and guiding him toward the door. Neighbors peeked from their windows, whispering to each other in confusion. The man's apartment was neat, ordinary. There was nothing suspicious, nothing that could explain this sudden raid. Inside the police car, the man's mind raced. He stayed quiet, refusing to argue. Something about this felt wrong, but he knew protesting would do no good. The ride to the station was tense. The officers exchanged short words, glancing at him with a mixture of suspicion and frustration. None of them spoke of evidence, because there was none. At the station, the man was led into a small, dimly lit room. The walls were bare, the single fluorescent light flickered slightly above. He sat down calmly, his hands cuffed in front of him. The officers who had arrested him left the room, and a younger detective entered. "I need to know your name," the detective said, sitting across from him. His pen hovered over a notebook, ready to record every word. The man looked at him steadily. "I told the officers already." "You have the wrong person." The detective frowned. "That's not what the call said. We have orders to hold you." Confusion and unease filled the room. The man's calmness made the detective uneasy. There was something unusual about him, something the officers could not immediately recognize. "What do you mean, wrong person?" the detective asked, leaning forward. "You fit the description perfectly." The man shook his head slowly. "I don't. I am not who you think I am. You have no evidence. You are making a mistake." For a moment, silence fell. The detective studied him closely. His face was ordinary, but his eyes held a quiet strength, a knowledge that seemed too deep for an ordinary man. It was the kind of calmness that made others doubt themselves. Meanwhile, other officers moved around the station, whispering to each other. Some doubted the arrest. Some wondered why the higher-ups had sent a team to detain an apparently innocent man. One officer even muttered, "Who is this guy, really?" The man's belongings were checked. Nothing unusual was found, just everyday items, clothes, a laptop, a few books. Yet, as one officer lifted a small, nondescript box from a drawer, his eyes widened. Inside was a device, unlike anything they had seen before. It glowed faintly, small lights blinking in an intricate pattern. "Where did you get this?" an officer asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The man said nothing, only gave a small, calm smile. That smile made the room colder somehow, as if the air had shifted. The officers didn't know it yet, but this man was not ordinary. Something about him, something hidden, had just begun to ripple through the station. Hours passed. The man remained seated, quiet, almost meditative. Every now and then, officers would glance at him, exchanging uncertain looks. Who was he? Why had he been arrested without evidence? And what was in that small box that made even the most experienced officers uneasy? Outside the interrogation room, whispers spread like wildfire. Even those who had no reason to care were drawn in by the mystery. The man's calm, silent presence unsettled the station in a way no one could explain. Some officers tried to convince themselves that it was just nerves. Others weren't so sure. As midnight approached, a senior officer entered. His eyes were sharp, his expression serious. He glanced at the man and then at the device. His face went pale for a brief moment. Nobody in the station had expected this. The man, still calm, still silent, had just revealed a hint of his identity, a truth that would leave everyone shocked once fully uncovered. And for the first time, the man finally spoke a single sentence, quiet but clear. "You don't know who I am, yet." The words hung in the air. The station went silent. Hearts pounded. Minds raced. What had begun as a routine arrest had turned into something none of them could have imagined. And nobody knew that the night was far from over. The interrogation room was silent except for the low hum of the flickering fluorescent light. The man sat upright in his chair, calm and composed, his hands still cuffed in front of him. Across the table, Detective Harris shuffled papers, though he knew there was nothing in them, nothing linking this man to any crime. Yet, here he was, staring at someone who refused to show fear, someone who seemed almost untouchable in his calmness. "You need to tell me your name again," Harris said, leaning forward. His voice was firm but carried a trace of doubt. "You were arrested for serious suspicion. We need answers." "I told the officers already," the man replied, his voice steady. "You have nothing on me. You're wasting your time." Harris frowned. There was something about this man, something deeper than defiance. His eyes were steady, almost intelligent, and they seemed to look right through the detective, measuring him, judging him. Harris had interrogated hundreds of suspects, but none had unsettled him like this. "Orders are orders," Harris said. "Someone wants you here. So you'll answer my questions, or I'll have to hold you longer." The man leaned back slightly. "I have already answered. You have no evidence. You have no reason to keep me here. I don't understand why this is happening." Harris slammed his hand on the table, frustration boiling over. "Do you know what it looks like from our side? You're quiet, you're calm, and yet somebody says you're dangerous. Tell me how I'm supposed to read that?" The man's expression didn't change. Sometimes danger is only what people imagine. Harris's frustration deepened. He had to admit, the man's calmness was unsettling. He wasn't acting nervous. He wasn't panicking. There was no sign of guilt, no hint of fear. Yet, something about him screamed that he was different, that he was not ordinary. One of the younger officers, standing by the door, whispered to Harris, "Sir, maybe we should check his background again. There's something off here. He doesn't fit any record we have." Harris shook his head. "We've done everything. No record, no arrests, no connections. Nothing. But someone called him in. Someone powerful." The man suddenly spoke again, his voice calm, almost soft. "I am not hiding. I am here. If you are looking for evidence, you won't find it. Not because I am clever, but because there is nothing to find. You will understand soon enough." Harris froze. There was a quiet confidence in the man's words that made the detective uneasy. It wasn't arrogance. It was knowledge. Knowledge that Harris couldn't comprehend. The kind that hinted at a life lived far beyond ordinary limits. Time passed. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second heavy in the room. Harris tried to push harder. "Do you know why we arrested you? You don't even fit the description fully. Something about this feels wrong. Who are you really?" The man looked down for a moment, as if weighing his words carefully. Then he lifted his eyes to Harris. "You are not ready to know yet. Your world is not ready for it." Harris's pen hovered over his notebook, but he didn't write. How could he? The man's words were strange, almost impossible. Yet, there was a weight to them, a seriousness that made Harris pause. The man's presence alone seemed to fill the room, demanding attention, respect, and, unsettlingly, obedience. Meanwhile, outside the room, whispers traveled through the station. Officers who had come to watch were discussing in low voices. "Who is he? Why is he so calm? How can someone arrested without evidence act like this? One officer remembered something unusual from the arrest: a small, blowing device taken from the man's apartment. It's not normal, he said quietly to a colleague. Whatever it is, it made even Captain Simmons nervous. That man, he isn't ordinary. Back inside the room, Harris tried another approach. If someone is after you, maybe we can help. Maybe you can tell us who you are, and why this is happening. It will help us protect you, and maybe explain this whole mess. The man's calm gaze didn't waver. I don't need protection. You cannot imagine who I am or what I have faced. This is bigger than you or me. You will see soon enough. The detective leaned back, rubbing his temple. The man's words were unsettling, but he had to keep control. He had rules. He had procedures. Yet, with every passing minute, he felt more like he was a part of something he couldn't understand. Something bigger than the station, bigger than the city, bigger than the law itself. Suddenly, the door opened quietly. A senior officer entered, his face pale, eyes sharp. He glanced at the man, then at the device taken from the apartment. His hands trembled slightly as he spoke to Harris. We need to move fast, he said. This isn't ordinary. Whoever he is, this is serious. Harris turned to the man, hoping for answers. But the man only smiled faintly, calm, collected, unshaken. You are closer than you think, he said quietly. And yet, you still do not know the truth. The room grew tense. Harris felt a chill run down his spine. Every instinct screamed that this was no ordinary case. The man had been arrested without evidence, yet now he had unsettled the entire station, shaken the detectives, and even worried the higher-ups. And in that silence, Harris realized the truth: the man's identity was not just mysterious, it was dangerous in ways no one could predict. The detective took a deep breath. The interrogation had only begun, and yet, already, he knew this night would change everything. Something hidden, powerful, and extraordinary had entered their lives. And no one, not even the police, could fully understand it yet. The night grew heavier in the station, the fluorescent lights casting long, harsh shadows across the walls. The man sat quietly in the interrogation room, his calmness unnerving every officer who walked past. Outside, whispers spread quickly. Some speculated about his identity, others felt a strange sense of unease, as if the very air had changed. No one could deny it, this man was unlike anyone they had ever seen. Detective Harris sat back in his chair, exhausted but unable to leave. He had spent hours questioning the man, trying to pierce the calm exterior, but each attempt had only revealed more mystery. He decided to try a different approach. Tell me about your past, Harris said, leaning forward, trying to keep his voice steady. Just something that explains why someone thinks you're dangerous. It doesn't have to be much. The man's eyes flickered for a brief second, and then he spoke, his voice low but firm. My past is not simple. It is filled with choices that most would never understand. Lives I have saved, lives I have lost, and secrets kept so deep that even now, the world cannot know them. Harris frowned. He had expected a story of small crimes or mistaken identity, but not this. Lives you've saved? Secrets? What do you mean? The man paused, as if recalling memories that weighed heavily on him. Years ago, before this life, I worked in places where few dared to go. Conflicts that were hidden, battles that were never recorded. I did things not for glory, not for recognition, but because someone had to do them. Someone had to make the hard choices. Harris felt a shiver run down his spine. This wasn't just a man with a past, this was someone who had lived in a world of danger, responsibility, and sacrifices beyond comprehension. And yet, here he sat, calm and unassuming, as if nothing had happened. Outside the room, officers who had gathered to watch exchanged uneasy glances. One whispered to another, "Do you hear that? He's talking like he's some kind of hero or something. How is that possible?" The man continued, his voice steady but filled with quiet emotion. I have seen people die in ways no one should ever witness. I have made decisions that cost lives, yet saved countless others. And in all of it, I remain silent, because the world is not ready to know. Most would judge me. Most would fear me. Harris's pen hovered over his notebook, but he couldn't write fast enough. Every word the man spoke painted a picture more incredible than the last. The officers had arrested him without evidence, yet now they were beginning to understand why someone powerful would want him held, why the higher-ups were involved. "Why are you here then?" Harris asked finally, his voice softer. "Why did someone call us? Why did they want you arrested if you're not a criminal?" The man leaned back slightly, clasping his hands together. "Because even the world's most careful secrets have a way of surfacing. I was found. And now, those who fear what I represent want control, or they want me silenced. That is why I am here. Not because I did wrong, but because others think they can dictate the truth." Harris felt his skepticism clash with a rising sense of awe. This man, he had lived a life beyond ordinary comprehension. And somehow, everyone in the station had been pulled into his story, whether they realized it or not. Then, almost as if sensing the detective's thoughts, the man added quietly, "I did not ask for recognition. I did not ask for fame. I simply did what needed to be done. And now I am in your hands, not because of choice, but because of fear." The words hung heavy in the room. Harris could feel the tension, the weight of the man's past pressing against the ordinary walls of the station. Every officer who walked past could sense it too, a quiet power, a calm that demanded attention, a story they could barely comprehend. Suddenly, the man's gaze shifted toward the door, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Someone is watching," he said softly. "Not from here, not from the station, but close. They have waited a long time for this moment." Harris's heart raced. "Who? What do you mean?" The man didn't answer directly. He only smiled faintly, a calm, knowing smile that made the detective uneasy. "You will see. Soon enough, the pieces will come together, and then you will understand everything. But until then, watch carefully. Listen carefully. The truth is closer than you think, yet further than you can imagine." Outside the room, the station grew restless. Officers whispered, checked their radios, and looked around nervously. The small device taken from the man's apartment had been placed in a secure room, but even that couldn't calm the unease spreading through the building. Something about the man, his past, and his words made them all feel vulnerable, like they were standing on the edge of a storm that had not yet arrived. Harris sat back, staring at the man. He realized something crucial: this was not a simple case of mistaken identity. This was not a criminal hiding from the law. This man carried a life filled with secrets, danger, and responsibility, a life that the ordinary world could neither understand nor contain. And yet, there was something more. In his calm demeanor, in the quiet confidence of his words, Harris sensed a hint of vulnerability. The man had faced incredible dangers, made impossible choices, and carried the weight of countless lives. But now, here in this small, ordinary station, he was at the mercy of people who didn't yet understand him. The man's past had begun to emerge, painting a picture of heroism, sacrifice, and quiet strength. And as the hours stretched on, Harris realized one undeniable truth: the world outside the station would never see him as just a man. They would see a legend. And legends, Harris knew, always left a mark, sometimes on history, sometimes on the hearts of those who dared to witness them. The station was quieter than usual, but the tension was thick enough to be cut with a knife. Officers moved cautiously, glancing at the interrogation room where the man had been held for hours. No one spoke above a whisper, as if they feared disturbing something far bigger than themselves. The man sat calmly, his hands still cuffed, eyes steady and observant. But tonight, everything was about to change. Detective Harris stood outside the room, exchanging a tense look with a senior officer. "We need to know who he is," Harris said quietly. "The higher-ups are asking questions we can't answer. Everyone here is uneasy. There's something about him." The senior officer nodded, eyes scanning the hallway. "You're right. Everyone feels it. The calmness, the confidence, it's not normal. And that device from his apartment, it's extraordinary. We've never seen anything like it." Inside, the man's gaze wandered to the small, blinking device that had been placed on a secure table nearby. It was simple in appearance, but its faint glow seemed to carry power. The officers who had handled it earlier hadn't understood its function, yet even from across the room, its presence was enough to make some of them uneasy. Harris opened the door and stepped inside, trying to keep his voice steady. "We need answers now," he said. "This can't go on forever. Whoever you are, it's time we knew. You've stayed silent long enough." The man leaned back, almost relaxed, and let out a slow, calm breath. "I suppose the time has come," he said softly. "Not because I choose to speak, but because the truth will no longer remain hidden." Harris raised an eyebrow. "Truth about what?" The man's eyes flicked to the device. "This is why I am here, and why they wanted me arrested. That device, it is not simply a machine. It is a key. A key to knowledge, power, and protection the world has never known. And for that reason, I have enemies." The senior officer stepped closer. "Enemies? What do you mean? Who are they?" The man's calm expression didn't change, but his eyes seemed to burn with a quiet intensity. "They are people who fear what I represent. Those who know me, or think they do believe controlling me will give them control over everything I protect. They are not ordinary criminals. They are organized, powerful, and patient. And they have been waiting a long time for this moment." Harris felt a chill run down his spine. Something in the man's tone, the weight of his words, made him realize that this was not a simple case of mistaken identity or a routine arrest. This man, his life, his past, and now this device, it all pointed to something far larger, far more dangerous than anything the station had ever faced. The man continued, his voice low but unwavering. "I have done things no one knew. I have protected lives, civilizations even, without recognition. I have acted when the world could not. And tonight, the world will begin to understand, whether it is ready or not." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Some whispered among themselves, questioning if they were dealing with a man or something else entirely. The calm aura around him was disarming, almost commanding, and the room seemed to shrink under the weight of his presence. Harris took a deep breath. "Are you saying you're more than just a man?" The man smiled faintly, a calm, knowing smile. "In a sense, yes. I am a man, but my life has always been connected to forces, responsibilities, and knowledge beyond ordinary understanding. I have been ordinary to the world, but not to the events that shaped it. And now, my identity is no longer a secret." For a moment, the room was silent. The words hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Every officer, every observer, felt it, the realization that the man before them was extraordinary in ways they could barely imagine. Harris swallowed hard. "Extraordinary, how? You have to be specific. We need proof, something real." The man nodded slowly. "Proof?" He gestured toward the device. "This will explain some of it. It holds records, evidence, and technology that has been safeguarded for decades. It contains knowledge that could save lives, or destroy them if misused. And because of it, I have been hunted, observed, and now, arrested without reason." The senior officer stepped closer, eyes wide. "Arrested, for what? For protecting it?" "Yes," the man replied quietly. "Because people feared what I could do with it. They did not understand. They only saw the potential threat. And that is why I have sat here, calm, waiting for the truth to reach you. Waiting for you to see me as I truly am, not a suspect, not a criminal, but a guardian." The words struck the room with a force stronger than any shouted command. Officers felt disbelief, admiration, and unease all at once. It was impossible to deny, this man's calmness, intelligence, and control over the situation were far beyond ordinary limits. Harris felt a mix of awe and guilt. "So, we arrested a hero," he whispered under his breath. The man's eyes met his, unwavering. "Not for heroism. For being necessary. For being prepared when no one else was. And now, the moment has come where everyone must understand the truth. My identity, my purpose, my life, none of it was ordinary. And soon, everyone here will see why this station, this city, and even the world, underestimated me. Suddenly, the device on the table blinked faster, as if responding to the man's words. Its glow seemed brighter, and for the first time, the officers noticed patterns, symbols, numbers, and lines of light forming and moving across its surface. The realization hit them simultaneously: this was no ordinary machine. And the man, he was no ordinary man. Harris took a deep breath, feeling the full weight of the revelation. You're not just a man in trouble. You're something else. Something bigger. The man leaned back slightly, calm, almost serene. Exactly. And tonight, your world begins to understand. The people who feared me will move. The ones who watched will act. And this station will witness events it never imagined. The silence that followed was heavy, intense. Every officer in the room, every person nearby, felt the magnitude of what had just been revealed. The calm man in front of them was extraordinary, a guardian of secrets, a protector of lives. And the arrest that had seemed so simple hours ago was nothing more than a step in a story far larger than anyone had imagined. Harris knew, in that moment, that nothing would ever be the same. The station, the city, even the world, all had glimpsed the edge of something extraordinary. And the man before them, his true identity had left everyone in shock. The calm in the station shattered like glass. The revelation of the man's true identity had spread quickly, leaving a ripple of tension that no one could ignore. Officers whispered in corners, eyes darting toward the interrogation room. Something was coming, something they couldn't see yet but could feel. The man sat quietly, hands still cuffed, his calmness unbroken, but there was a subtle tension in his eyes. He had sensed it long before anyone else, the danger that was approaching, swift and silent. Detective Harris paced outside the room, heart pounding. "We need to lock everything down," he said to the senior officer. "If what he says is true, if people are after him, we could be next." The senior officer nodded. "I've alerted headquarters, but this is moving fast. Whatever's coming, it won't wait for permission." Inside the room, the man leaned slightly forward, his gaze fixed on the blinking device. Its faint glow had grown stronger, almost pulsing, as if reacting to the tension in the air. He spoke quietly, almost to himself. "They are closer than you think. They've watched, waited, and prepared. The time has come. And soon, this place will become a battlefield, even though it is just a police station." Harris froze, catching the words through the open door. Battlefield? Here? In the station? The man gave a small, calm nod. Yes. But stay calm. Fear is their advantage. We will not give it to them. A sudden alarm shattered the stillness. Red lights flashed, and an automated voice echoed through the station: "Security breach. Unauthorized access detected." Officers jumped into action, drawing their weapons, shouting orders, running toward doors and corridors. Harris grabbed her radio. "All units, lock down. This is not a drill. Lock all entrances and exits." The man stood slowly, his calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the chaos around him. "They are here," he said softly. "And they are fast. Watch closely, detective. Watch and learn." Moments later, shadows moved along the station's outer walls. Silent, fast, precise. These were not ordinary intruders. Harris could see their approach on the security monitors. Masks covered their faces, their movements coordinated, efficient, almost mechanical. They were trained for a single purpose: to capture the man. "Move to defensive positions." Harris shouted, his voice echoing through the hallways. Officers scrambled, barricading doors, taking cover, and preparing to defend the station. Every heartbeat felt like a drum, every movement tense with fear and anticipation. The man moved calmly through the chaos, unshackled now, hands free, his eyes scanning the station. "Do not interfere unless necessary," he instructed. "I will guide you. Trust my knowledge. Follow carefully." Officers hesitated, but there was no time to question him. A sharp sound rang out, the first shot, precise, deadly. Panic surged through some of the junior officers, but the man's presence had a strange effect. His calm authority spread, focusing their fear into controlled action. He led them through corridors, pointing out weak points, entrances, and positions. Here. Cover the stairwell. There. Hold the lobby. They will try to isolate you. Do not let them. His voice was firm, commanding, yet steady. Every word was like a lifeline, every instruction precise and clear. Outside the station, the intruders had reached the main entrance. They moved with terrifying efficiency, cutting locks, breaking doors, their faces still hidden, their intentions clear. Harris realized that these were not ordinary criminals, they were part of a larger, organized group, highly trained, and dangerous. Shots rang out, echoing through the station. Officers returned fire, but the intruders advanced with calculated steps, almost like they had anticipated every move. Harris glanced at the man, whose eyes were fixed on the monitors, reading the intruders' movements before they even happened. They are professionals, the man said calmly. But fear is predictable. Anger is predictable. Their weakness is in their strategy, not their skill. Harris watched in awe as the man moved, intercepting intruders, disarming them, guiding officers, and using his knowledge of the station to turn the chaos into a controlled battlefield. Every movement was precise, almost effortless, yet deadly in effect. One intruder broke through a barricade and advanced toward Harris. Before he could react, the man was there, a swift motion, disarming the intruder and guiding him to the floor. Harris's heart raced. This man's calm, skillful actions were saving lives, controlling chaos, and keeping everyone alive. Meanwhile, the device on the table blinked brighter, as if feeding energy into the man's strategy. It was more than a tool, it was part of him, part of his plan. Harris realized that everything the man had said about his past, about his hidden life and extraordinary abilities, was true. This was no ordinary human. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. The intruders' movements became desperate as their plan failed repeatedly. Officers followed the man's directions, their fear turning into trust, their panic into precision. Every officer, every soldier, every police staff member began to understand what it meant to follow someone extraordinary. Finally, the last intruder was subdued, neutralized without a single casualty among the officers. Silence fell over the station, broken only by heavy breathing and the occasional clatter of weapons being set down. Harris looked around, astonished. The man stood in the center of the room, calm, collected, unshaken. "You see," he said quietly, turning to Harris, "danger is temporary. Fear is controllable. Strength comes from knowledge and clarity, not from panic." Harris nodded slowly, still in disbelief. I've never seen anything like this. You saved us all. But, who are they? Why did they come for you?" The man's eyes softened for a moment, almost reflective. "Because I hold what others cannot have, and I protect what others cannot protect. That is why I have been hunted. That is why I have been tested. And that is why, even now, the world is not ready for everything I know." Officers around them, still shaken but alive, began to understand. This man was no ordinary hero, he was extraordinary in every sense. He had faced danger, controlled chaos, and guided them through a storm that no one else could have survived. Harris approached him cautiously. "So, the arrest, the interrogation, it was all nothing compared to this." The man gave a small, calm smile. "Nothing is ordinary when the world faces what it does not understand. But tonight, you saw the truth. You saw what happens when fear meets knowledge, and when calm meets chaos." And as the officers slowly gathered, catching their breath and trying to comprehend what had just occurred, Harris knew one undeniable fact: this night, this station, and every life within it had been changed forever. The danger had come, and the man had faced it with a strength, calmness, and skill that left everyone in awe. But even as the danger subsided, the air was tense with anticipation. The battle had been won, yes, but the world outside was still full of threats. And the man, the extraordinary man, had only just begun to reveal his true role in it. The station was quiet again, but the calm felt different this time. The chaos and danger had passed, but the memory of it lingered in every corner: the broken doors, the spent cartridges, the officer's heavy breathing. Outside, the city remained unaware of what had happened, unaware of the extraordinary man who had just turned a routine station into a battlefield and emerged victorious without a single casualty. Detective Harris stood in the center of the room, staring at the man who had saved them all. The man's hands were free now, his posture calm, almost regal, yet there was a quiet humility in the way he carried himself. He had faced danger that no ordinary human could survive, and yet he remained composed, measured, almost serene. You're incredible," Harris said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't think I've ever seen anyone like you in my life. You saved all of us, but why? Why risk yourself like that?" The man's eyes softened. "Because it was necessary. Someone had to protect those who could not protect themselves. That is all. Fear and chaos do not need to triumph when calmness and knowledge exist." Around them, officers began to gather. Some looked at him with awe, others with relief. The whispers that had spread through the station hours earlier now carried words of admiration. "He's extraordinary. I can't believe we doubted him. Who is he really?" The senior officer stepped forward, his expression a mixture of respect and humility. "You've saved us all. You've shown us what courage, intelligence, and calmness can do. I don't know how to thank you properly. You're no ordinary man, you're a guardian." The man nodded, a faint smile on his face. "I did what anyone should, if they had the knowledge and opportunity. But remember, heroism is not about recognition. It is about action. And sometimes, the world does not recognize the ones who act. That is fine. What matters is that lives are protected, and truth is preserved." Harris felt a wave of emotion rise in him. The man had been arrested without evidence, doubted, questioned, and yet he had remained calm, proving that his identity and strength were far beyond anyone's comprehension. Harris realized that the entire station, and perhaps even the city, had been given a rare glimpse of true human potential: courage, intelligence, and morality intertwined. The officers, who had once questioned his presence, now began to see him in a new light. They approached cautiously, some shaking hands, others bowing their heads slightly in respect. One officer said softly, "We were wrong to doubt you. We didn't understand, but now we do. Thank you for everything." The man's gaze swept the room, calm and steady. "Do not thank me. Recognize the truth, yes, but remember that everyone has a role. Even in chaos, even in danger, your choices matter. And tonight, your choices mattered. You acted bravely. You followed guidance. You preserved lives. That is just as important as what I did." Harris felt a lump in his throat. For hours, he had been a detective trying to control a situation he did not understand. But now, he felt something deeper: admiration, respect, and even humility. This man had taught them all a lesson in courage and morality, not by words, but by action. The senior officer spoke again, his voice steady. "We've contacted higher authorities. They will want to know everything. Your identity, your past, your purpose. And they will recognize what you are. Humanity, or at least, our world, deserves to know the truth." The man's expression remained calm, but there was a subtle weight in his eyes. "Recognition is not my goal. Safety and preservation are. But if my identity inspires understanding, courage, or morality, then perhaps it is time for it to be known. Yet, remember, danger does not vanish simply because it is known. It always exists. Awareness is just the first step." Outside the station, the city moved unaware of the extraordinary events that had just unfolded. But inside, the officers and staff had experienced something unforgettable. They had witnessed bravery, strategy, and moral clarity at levels they had never imagined. And at the center of it all stood one man, calm, composed, extraordinary. Detective Harris approached him once more. "Will you stay, or will you disappear like before?" The man looked at him and smiled faintly. "I will stay as long as I am needed. But I do not seek fame, or thanks, or power. I seek only to ensure that what must be protected is protected. My life has always been about that. Recognition is secondary. Action is primary. Harris nodded. Then know this, you have left a mark on all of us. We will never forget tonight, or what you've done. And even if the world doesn't know your name yet, we do. And that matters. The man's eyes softened. That is enough. The world may not always understand, but those who have witnessed truth, they carry it forward. That is the ripple effect. That is what matters. As the night drew on, the officers returned to their duties, but the energy in the station had changed. There was a newfound respect, an understanding that courage and calmness could overcome fear and chaos. Harris stayed behind for a moment, looking at the man, realizing the truth he had lived. Extraordinary individuals could walk among ordinary people, unseen, yet capable of changing the course of lives with a single act of bravery and clarity. The man finally left the interrogation room, walking through the station calmly, unnoticed by many but profoundly impacting everyone who had observed him. He did not boast, did not claim glory, he simply moved forward, a quiet guardian in a world that often forgot to notice its heroes. And for the first time, Detective Harris understood the full truth of humanity's potential. Sometimes, the greatest power was not weapons or authority, but courage, morality, and the unwavering calm in the face of chaos. The station would remember this night forever. They would tell the story, quietly at first, then louder as trust and awe spread. The man had been arrested without evidence, doubted, and questioned, but in the end, his identity, courage, and wisdom had left everyone in awe. Justice had been served, not by law alone, but by the recognition of what was truly extraordinary. And humanity, even in its ordinary forms, had witnessed something extraordinary that night. The man looked once more at the city beyond the station windows, a faint smile on his lips. He had faced danger, revealed his truth, and ensured lives were safe. And though the world might never fully understand him, those who had witnessed it knew one thing for certain: courage, calmness, and moral strength could change everything. And with that, he walked into the night, leaving his station and a world forever changed.